I'm Scott Allen Miller. This is my life living in my own Nicaragua. Today on the Expat community, Mark from San Juan del Sur was asking about the prevalence of HOAs, or their equivalent here in Nicaragua. This isn't something that he's used to coming from Europe, but here in Nicaragua, he has encountered them a bit, as have other people. And so the question came up is this a normal thing? Is this something you're going to encounter on a regular basis? And that is a great question, because of course, if you're looking at renting or owning long-term here in Nicaragua, how you're going to own a home or not get to own your home is of pretty high importance. So we're going to talk about HOAs today, hopefully before the storm hits, but right after the bump. If you're coming from the United States or Canada, you're probably so used to HOAs and not truly owning and controlling your own home space that it may not even occur to you to be a thing to be worried about. The idea of condo ownership, where you kind of own a portion, a share of a building, but you don't really own and control your own space, is super prevalent in the United States, to the point of being absolutely normal in many urban areas. Many suburbs are built around this concept. Even though we don't call it condos, we call them HOAs. In the US, the idea is essentially the same. Here in Nicaragua, just important terminology. Once in a while, you will actually encounter the term HOA, but mostly that is only if someone is translating for you as a foreigner. In most cases, you are going to see condo ownership or something like that mentioned. That's normally how it is thought of, but the idea is the same. You own a piece of land. You'll have a deed to a lot, but you don't have complete control over it. You have to pay monthly fees or annual fees, and you have some shared resources, whether it's gardeners or security or upkeep, infrastructure, and so forth. So why do HOAs exist in the first place? So if you're coming from Europe, you may not be used to these at all. They actually make a bit of sense. The thing is that if you're coming from North America, they are so common that we just assume that they are a normal everyday thing. So if you're in certain areas down here, you may encounter them, and most of the American and Canadian population is not even going to register that it's something they need to think about. But if you're coming from Europe, it may catch you off guard. So in much of US and Canada, what we have is these big shared developments. It could be a single building, and we call that a condo, or it could be shared buildings in a single development, and we call that an HOA. Under the hood, I'm sure there's differences. It doesn't matter. The idea, though, you buy, right, traded on the market, your house or your apartment, right? In England, they would call these flats. We call them condos. And if it's an apartment, that means it's a rental. If it's a condo, it means someone owns it. You can rent out a condo, then it's a condo apartment. This gets complicated. Okay, so here or anywhere in US or Canada, right, this means that you don't have to take care of your own lawn. You don't have to take care of your own maintenance. You don't have to take care of your security. All those things, the parts of the building that you don't own, or the parts of the neighborhood that you don't own, you have to pay for every month. Of course, if you don't, who is going to pay for it, right? Only the homeowners exist to pay for this, so it has to be, right? You're kind of stuck. So having these shared resources that are not part of a government facility, right? This is private. If it was government, it would be a neighborhood, and then they can enact taxes. And of course, paying taxes is just an HOA for a larger community, right? You can think of it that way. So there's some overlap here, understandably, but there is generally a big difference between paying taxes, where your taxes are going into a giant pool with all the people in the region and going towards all the things that may need to be done, and you have a government to hold accountable and say, hey, I didn't vote for not to mow my lawn or whatever. It is a bit different than a private company taking 10 houses, 30 houses, and saying these houses are all stuck together and all have to pay us, and we're going to potentially make money providing some of these services. And it's a really common thing for this to be a long-term money-making endeavor for developers. So a developer may go in and make a few $1 million selling a bunch of lots that they've set up, but then ongoing, they continue making money forever by providing services for the HOA or the condo. Not in all cases, but it's quite common. Here in Nicaragua, because people are used to that, and for other reasons we're going to talk about in a minute, this is a common approach to things. So you won't see this a ton. If you're going around the country, this is not the norm. That was part of the question. They do exist, right? But in general, Nicaraguans don't live in this kind of structure, but every city is going to have a little bit of it. Mostly they're called residencias. Sometimes they're called condos. You will find it, right? So it's not unheard of. and they learned from North America that this is a thing to do, and people often want these resources, but expats tend to want them more, and expats are much more conditioned to be looking for this or to be accepting of this. Most Nicaraguans are going to grow up in a barrio, and they're going to be used to owning their own house or having an area that you never even have a deed at all. They have their own structure, they can do whatever they want. The idea that they have to do things by rules of their community and have to pay into a communal thing, none of that normally exists. So that's a little bit different, but some look at these places that exist and say, ooh, that's really nice, I want to live in that kind of place, and then are willing to do so. And often the HOA fees are quite low here. That is worth noting. The HOA fees you're used to in North America typically are very high for a lot of logical reasons. Here they tend to be very low. Watch out, they could be high, but in general they're incredibly low. One of the high ones that was mentioned today was $1,500 per year. And when you think about the fact that you're getting 24/7 security, gated community infrastructure, some shared things, and you're paying for it out of just like 9 houses or something, of course it has to be a lot more expensive than if you had, 50 houses and just 1 security guard per shift. Like somewhere you have to pay for those people to work, and there's a certain amount of money that goes into that. So if you have just a few houses, and that's, I've got a development really close to where I live that currently has like 6 lots available. None are developed yet, right? The entire development is 6 houses. And if they are going to put in a security guard, which they will need once the first house gets built, if one ever does, there's only 1 lot even sold. It may just be a model out of the 6, and they put in a bit of foundation and just abandoned it like a year ago. So now there's just an old foundation wearing away and no security, which is exactly the thing we're afraid of anytime we see one of these places. Not enough people go in, and the burden of paying for the services falls to whatever houses are there. If you're the only one who goes in, either you do without the services that you bought the place assuming you'd have, or you're going to be stuck paying a ton for them. If you have a place that is expecting 10 homes and you're going to pay $1,500 per year, you may end up paying almost $1,500 per month because there's no one else to shoulder that cost. So just things to watch out for. But HOAs can work out as long as you know all the houses are going to sell, or nearly all of them, and all the people are going to continue to pay their dues, because if they don't, you run into big problems. Like then you have to figure out how to seize their land, you have to resell it. Is that really something you want to have happen? But if you don't, the people who are there are going to be paying money for them, and they're stealing from everyone else. So there's no good answer when you have this kind of situation. It's one of the reasons that people don't like it. So why is it particularly popular here? Beyond just people being conditioned to accept it as an acceptable means of living, why would it be popular in Nicaragua within expat communities? And that's why it came up, right? Mark is in San Juan del Sur. I don't know if he's living there, but he's looking at places there, right? And this is where it came up. So why is it more likely to come up there? Well, the reason is simple. In some earlier videos, we talked about, 1, there's a big trend in expats to be snowbirds or similarly not be here full time. This is super expected. We're a tropical country. North America gets really cold in the winter, so there's a huge demographic of people who just want to ease off their winters by coming down somewhere that's safe and cheap and warm. Nicaragua nails it on all those things. So this is an ideal snowbird location for so many people, and so people take advantage of that. So we're used to tons of the expats that we know only being here part of the year. Some do it for other reasons other than the weather, but that's basically why we see specific trends within that. So it is very normal, maybe 50% or more of the expats who own property here in Nicaragua are only here part of the year. It might be 9 months, might be 3 months, but something in that range. We'll just say 6 months to make it easy. If you're going to be living here 6 months out of the year, there's some things you want to take care of. And generally, you don't want to leave a house idle for 6 months of the year. Now, like we always say, Nicaragua is very low on violent crime, but it is quite high on petty crime. And that includes if someone knows your house is empty, breaking into your house when no one's there is not a violent crime, right? They're not putting anyone in danger. You're not worried about someone breaking down the door while you're in there, but someone might pick a lock if they have unlimited time and know that you aren't there, right? They're not at any risk. They're not putting anyone else at any risk, and they know your house is full of stuff. And when you have the extreme affluence of the expat community on average and the extreme poverty of the non-expat community on average, you have high-profile targets that are extremely easy to identify and are almost guaranteed to have their houses loaded with things that are worth lots of money. And you have a very large audience who is, 1, in desperate need of that money, and 2, has generally a very big opportunity to observe over long periods of time and have a very high degree of certainty that a house is empty. So because of that disparity, because of that economic realities, it is a high target for expat homes to have things gone through if they leave the house idle for a long period of time. And having things like automated alarms and so forth are not as effective because we don't have tie-ins with the police departments to reach them that way. You would want to reach a service who would then call the police department. It would be more complicated. It could be done, and I'm sure people do it, but I don't know of places that do that. It's not a popular thing. What people do instead, because it is very cheap and much more effective, is they generally hire cuidadores. And we talked about this in other videos, right? This is why it is so normal for expats to have people who live on their property year round. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's a family. They might have kids, they might even have animals. They have normally their own living space, often outside the main family home, and they live there full time. They watch out after the house. Often at least one member of the family cooks and one does maintenance, and so you may get a built-in cook and maintenance and different tasks from having a cuidador. It's not just someone to watch your place. Normally it's often more than that. And having that assurance that there is a human that you trust at your home all the time is a big deal. They get housing for it and you pay them generally like minimum wage, but they get housing, and then often they're able to do something else during the day. They're not limited to being stuck in your house all the time. If they are, you're gonna pay them more and have them do more things, especially if it's a couple and not an individual. But if it's just an individual and they're just living at your house and they get to go have a day job and they're just there at night, right, which does almost everything that you need, that can be extremely cost effective. So this is a really popular thing. It gives a lot of Nicaraguans a way to get decent housing. And when you're away, of course, they get internet, power, all kinds of things because they're at your house. They have to be, right? So they may get access to your Netflix and stuff like that. It can be a really good value for someone who is not able to afford their own housing and allow for a lot more mobility in the market. So people looking to be cuidadores, there's a lot of logic as to why people are looking for that. And it creates a lot of jobs here in a country where unemployment is a big problem. So it's a very good thing in general, but not everyone wants to have a cuidador. Maybe it's too expensive because it's a full family living in your, like, it's just a lot, or maybe you just don't know people you can trust, or you feel uncomfortable with the situation, or you don't want to have people living at your house. There's a lot of reasons why that may not be something you can do or want to do. Totally understandable. So what is the alternative? Well, the logical alternative is being in a community where you have shared resources. Now, of course, you can have a house with a fence around it. That's not normal, and I don't live in a place like that. They do exist, but they're relatively rare. Typically, if you're going to have a fence, like a wall, like some people mentioned, I have a wall behind me, that's not my wall. That is a wall around a neighborhood, right? I am in a residencia. So it is a walled residencia to keep it separate from the other parts of the city that I'm in. And to have that, right, is a big benefit to a lot of people. Well, that makes them feel a lot more confident that no one's going to casually try to get into their house when they're not home, because you can't see their house to know if they're not home. No one can see if my car is here. No one can see if my guard is here. No one can see if my dogs are out. No one can see if my kids are playing. They can't watch us because of the wall. Privacy adds to security. People hopping a wall to maybe break into your house or just see if the doors are locked or see if anyone's home. Hopping a wall into someone's neighborhood to find out is a bold move, right? That's when you take on a lot of risk. You may meet a security guard or an angry dog or an owner who has a machete, right? Those are things you don't want to run into casually in a situation where they're allowed to attack you, right? You've broken in, right? So that's not a happy situation. You don't do that casually, right? So just having outside walls goes a long way. So a lot of people want that. And then being able to have full-time security, really big deal, because they're just watching over things all the time. It's not just casually having people that make sure that you're safe at night. It's also keeping an eye on everything. Wow, your house is not flooding. You don't have lights left on. We don't hear anything. We don't smell smoke. We don't see a fire. And if anything does happen, wow, there's some loud noise in your house, we're going to go in and find out that a raccoon broke in and is wreaking havoc, right? There's all kinds of reasons why having humans keep an eye on your property is super beneficial. Cuidadors are a bit heavy because you have one or more people dedicated around the clock to your house. That's extreme. But having a security guard who works for a number of houses and keeps an eye on yours, you don't need your house looked in on every single minute of the day. You just need it looked in, say, once an hour, and that's way more than enough. Right? Nothing major is going to happen. And especially if there's like a fire or something like that, flooding, you can look at it and go, oh, there's water flowing in over the wall. We got to deal with something right now, right? They can do stuff, right? So having a shared resource like a security guard can go a really long way. And being in a residencia where you have the houses close together sharing a security guard, they also watch each other. Like where I live, I can see my neighbors in their yard right there and my other neighbors right there. And we can all see each other's garage. And if anything was going to happen, we can tell that something is or isn't happening. We know who should be home home who shouldn't be home because we talk, we're social, right? Now, I live in an all Nicaraguan neighborhood, so I don't have any expats here, so we're not a high target area, and everyone knows each other, right? And everyone knows people in the community. So the whole community is watching out for us. We're not set apart. We are in a residencia, but we're not set apart from the rest of the community. We're all active members in our community here. So it's a bit different than an expat enclave. This is very much just an affluent Nicaraguan neighborhood. But that shared resource goes a really long way. So because we have so many expats who are snowbirding or similar, where they're only here part-time, maybe they're just heavy travelers, knowing that they can pick up at any time and leave and not have to maintain a full-time cuidador to watch over their house, but that their house will be safe and secure, is a really big deal. Now, of course, the same thing would happen in the United States if you didn't know anyone, if you moved to the US and you only plan to be there part-time. It would not be as dramatic, and there's more services to deal with this stuff. But leaving a house, especially one that is very isolated, expats have a tendency to be in isolated homes, just a different situation than many Nicaraguans. Leaving something that is very unobservable or less observable than average, and that no one knows. Your community doesn't tend to know you, the police don't tend to know you. So if something was to happen to your house, there may not be anyone to make a judgment call and say, I don't think that that's what they intended to do with their house. I don't think someone's supposed to be there. There's probably no one to do that. So expats anywhere have this problem of being an unknown community resource. It's just, you're just not enough a part of the community to have those natural things. Of course, some expats are going to know people. You got family members. You may not have to worry about this stuff, whether in Nicaragua or in the US. But the thing is that when you're in the United States, we don't tend to live in such a way that we have houses that are completely empty up to half or more of the year, and completely unobserved by our neighbors with no one around who knows them, right? If I ever owned a house that went idle for any amount of time in the United States, it either was in an HOA area where I didn't have to worry about it. I had active renters. I couldn't afford to leave the place empty, so there were people there because I was renting it out. Or it was near family and my father would swing by at least once a week and just make sure everything was cool with the house, right? Or I lived nearby and I would swing by very often, right? I never kept a house on the other side of the country for 6 months and never went there. Most people don't. Houses in America are extremely expensive, so we don't tend to do these things. But because Nicaragua is a low-cost market and we have people coming from high-income markets to here, with lots of extra money, the idea that you can just have a house and leave it empty half the year is very, very easy. And that's creating a new situation that we don't tend to see in reverse. We simply don't see that happen in reverse because it's too expensive. Who could afford to do that? There's almost nobody in the world who can afford to maintain a house in the United States or Canada that they are not using most of the time, right? Just crazy. But half the world can generally afford to do so in Nicaragua. And so we just see a challenge here that doesn't exist in most markets because of the incredible disparity between different countries' income and how incredibly low cost real estate is here. Plus, it's a tropical country that a lot of people want to vacation in. So you see people who buy vacation homes here, or that's how they're thinking of it. They want to return to the same place, makes total sense, but that creates these new security needs. And so that's why HOAs are very popular in expat communities, because it is incredibly popular to have these residencias, not here where I am, but in San Juan del Sur for sure, and sprinkled throughout the country for obviously, that could have up to half their houses empty at any given moment. It's completely crazy, but you'll go through, especially during the summer in North America, you can go through and be like, there's nobody here in tons of these places. They're all owned by someone, they're all used, they're not abandoned, but everybody's gone for months at a time. It feels like a ghost town sometimes. And so because of that, we just have very, very different needs. And so HOAs are a completely natural and logical reaction to that. But if you're going to be living here full time, then paying for an HOA and being locked into an HOA could be a huge negative. That's something you have to really watch out for, because you're not getting the benefits in the way that those people are. You're paying for benefits that you're not getting. But if you're going to be snowbirding, it may be the perfect thing for you. And so the same thing, if you're living here full time, having a cuidador may not make sense for you. But if you're only being here part of the time, but you're not living in a place with an HOA, cuidador may be the answer for you. So these are just some of the solutions that people have come up with to make having nearly abandoned homes, right? They're not abandoned, but they feel like that and they act like that, and it's very difficult to tell which ones are abandoned and which ones are just significant snowbirding time to locals. And so people may actually try to move into a house thinking, well, it seems like it's abandoned, I'll take my chances, right? Because they're going to try to squat and hope that no one notices for a long time, because that actually works. There's so many abandoned homes, actually abandoned, here in Nicaragua, that this blows the minds of many North Americans, where property is so expensive, no one would ever leave any significant amount of property. fallow. But here in Nicaragua, there is so little demand for property, so many more houses than are actually needed, that you actually get empty houses that people at some point give up on, whether the owners were Nicaraguan and moved away and they're like, I can't think about it, it's not something I can deal with. Or it's Americans bought it and never decided to do anything with their property, or just, you know, got busy and they make enough money and they paid for it in cash long ago, and they're just like, oh, I forgot about that. It stopped being a thing that I worried about. It wasn't enough money to really cripple me. And of course, selling it could be really hard. So people just kind of, well, what can I do? I can't sell it, so I can't worry about it. What am I going to do, right? So it's common for squatters to look for those opportunities, and every time you have a squatter, you definitely have someone taking a chance. They're guessing that they're going to get away with it. They're guessing it's going to work. And that doesn't make it any easier for you as a person who potentially has a house to make them not want to squat in it. So it's just one more factor as to why you don't really want to leave empty houses here. And we've talked about the empty house problem before, but that explains why HOAs in expat areas seem very common, even though here in Nicaragua, overall, they're pretty rare. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for the question and the comment, Mark. That's a good one to have as a topic. I think it's interesting. As always, if you'd like to sponsor the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlMiller, or hit that join button down there on Google, or join on Buy Me a Coffee. We got lots of ways. Getting those show notes, lots of information in there for everyone. Any way you need to contact me, social media, anything. Get in the comments and say hello. Give us a thumbs up. Watch another episode. That helps with the YouTube algorithm a lot, so I really appreciate that. And as always, I will see all of you tomorrow.